You are in the Mentoring Club Hour. This room has been set up in partnership between the Mentoring Club and Silicon Valley Startups on Clubhouse, which is also being spearheaded by one of our mentors, Sean Flynn. Most of you are familiar with the Mentoring Club, so I'll be quick with this. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and our mission is to provide a mentoring community for aspiring and seasoned leaders. Anywhere in the world, we help working people find mentors who can guide them to develop the skills they need to achieve their career and life goals. We help mentees fulfill their goals through meaningful work that creates positive impact in the world. And as mentees become leaders themselves, our dream is for them to become mentors to others. For this session, we've been running the series Career and Life Journeys of Mentors since the beginning of October. So far, we have had amazing stories just getting to know our mentors. A lot of people resonating with their stories. So we really hope that more people will be able to learn from our experiences and reach out to us whether they want to become mentors or mentees or supporters of the Mentoring Club. For this afternoon, our featured mentor is Shannon Rey Gibbs. Our interviewer is Hong Nguyen. Both of them are members in the Mentoring Club. Hong, on to you.
Thanks, Liso, and thank you everyone for coming here. Thanks for your visit and welcome. As Liso just explained, we are going to get to know one of our mentors and her career and life journey. And this is, as you see in the title, Find and Thrive in Your Genius Zone. It will have a happy Disney ending. All right, with that, welcome Shannon Rey Gibbs. Thanks for joining us and share your journey. How did your journey start? How did your career start? What did you do first? And how was that for you?
When I first started in my career, I didn't really have any direction or specific field that I wanted to go into, like a lot of my friends did at the time. I just knew that I wanted to go to college, get a degree, and go to work. And ironically, my first degree, my first major that I had chosen was architecture. After taking a couple of courses that were geared towards the architecture path, which I failed, was very quickly redirected by a career counselor into more of the soft skills, human related career fields, which turned out to be a much better fit for me. So I started in human resources, and it was just a job that I had landed through a temporary agency. I just wanted to get a job. That was my primary goal. And landing in human resources and recruiting actually ended up being a really great direction and fit for me.
You were happy in that job. You did well in that job. Eventually, something happened, like most of us. Why did you move on? What did you move on to?
From there is when I really started using my network, building and using my network to find the next steps in my career. So from there, I went into another human resources role where I was managing programs in recruiting. And I really got to get my hands into a lot of different projects. That's back in the days when we would do a lot of career fairs. So I was attending career fairs and I really enjoyed connecting with people and networking. So I started to get glimpses of what some of my genius zone was, but I couldn't have told you at the time in my 20s, that's what I was discovering. But I was starting to learn a lot about being in more of a service-oriented role, working with people, helping people connect with each other, because that's what recruiting is. And I started to learn a lot about myself and also running programs that I really enjoyed running programs and being a liaison with different departments. And in that role, this was in contract manufacturing, so it dates me a little bit in my career, but I was starting to get into recruiting and hiring from a manufacturing perspective. I really started to learn a lot about myself. Primarily what I look back now, hindsight, it was about building relationships is what really started to light me up in my career.
That's amazing, I think, for somebody that young to start knowing about yourself and what resonates for you. I'm curious, did you take at that time any of the tests like Myers-Briggs or any kind of things that give you any glimpse, or it just all personal insight?
It was a combination. I did take some of those tests. I remember taking the Myers-Briggs. I couldn't tell you when I first took it, but I think at the time I didn't fully understand. You're still learning a lot about yourself in your 20s and even sometimes into our 30s. So I don't think I fully saw my skills and my strengths along the way. And I now when I look back at, if I could go back and look at all of the different results of all those different tests that I did, I would say, aha, yes, of course, that's who I am. And that's where my strengths are. And I think part of what was beneficial for me too is I've been very, very fortunate throughout most of my career to have amazing mentors and managers, many of which I'm still connected with or still good friends with over all these years, that really helped me see my strengths. So I'd say that was one of the biggest things in my career that really moved me along and even catapulted my career in a lot of different ways, because I didn't always see my strengths. That was just something maybe, I know this is a challenge often that women have in particular, but I've seen it. It's both, men and women that experience this. We don't always see what we're good at. So it's helpful to have it reflected back to you by someone like a mentor or a manager.
That's a rare blessing for that matter. I think that's what people say. What exceptional managers do is they stage for your strengths to shine, right? That's a great blessing. I'm saying that with jealousy because that never happened to me. so,
Oh.
so what happened next after recruiting?
After working in recruiting and being a program manager, and then also doing a little bit of software training on internal systems, I started to get the itch to do something new. And this was one of my first pivots in my career. So I went from when I was working at the manufacturing organization, I managed all of the different vendor relationships for the recruiting department. And I started to notice that they seemed like they were having a lot more fun in their jobs. And so I started to get interested, and I started interviewing all of my different vendors, all the relationships that I had with my vendors. They were all primarily software systems or online advertising, recruiting. In speaking with all of them, I was just bold. I asked, do you have any openings at your company? So one of them did, and it was monster.com. And she said, well, it's a sales opportunity. So it would be working in online sales and online recruitment advertising. It terrified me. I never thought of myself as a salesperson, right? A lot of HR people would probably tell you this too. The HR personality usually is not same as a sales personality. So, but I said yes anyway, because I wanted to try something new. So I said yes to the sales job. I interviewed. During the interview process, they actually said, you know what? We have a new job that just opened up. It's called a solutions consultant. We actually think this is a better fit for you. And I had a bit of a sigh of relief because I thought, oh, yes, this actually does feel better for me. But I wouldn't have known about that opportunity had I not said yes to the sales job to begin with. So this was a big pivot in my career where I really started to see where I shine. And it was the first job I had where I truly felt like I loved my job. And it actually was interesting to hear a lot of people around me, because I was always saying, I love my job. I love my job. And people would look at me like, really? Nobody loves their job that much. But I did. And I started to learn that I was traveling. I was a sales partner. I was meeting with customers. I was doing training on all the different products and services that we had, making best practice recommendations, helping to grow the business, sell other offerings. And of course, I had a great region too. I was traveling in the Western US, so I was going to mostly warmer climates versus traveling back east. And I would do a lot of day trips, and I would go in. My job for the day was to fly to maybe LA, do a training for 2 hours, go out to a lovely lunch with my sales partner, and we would look out over the ocean, have this wonderful meal. I'd fly home, and that was my day. So this started to become another job where I was really learning a lot about, okay, what am I good at? And what do I really love doing?
Develop in sales myself, and that's the job that I must say I love the most. Now the thing is about sales, the sales profile normally says competitiveness, right? Negotiation, presentation, performance, risk taking. Is that you or no?
I think the older I get, the more I see that in myself. I never would have. I was an introvert and more of a people pleaser earlier in life. So all of the leadership and strength and boldness that I have today was slow in coming. I learned a lot of that on my own. And it was by being given opportunities where I needed to be bold, where I needed to be assertive, that I actually realized I had those strengths. So it was more, I think what I learned is selling through building relationships. And that's still today, I would say that's what works for my personality is. And fortunately, that's where a lot of sales has turned in that direction and realized there's value in building relationships, right? So it's not just trying to sell something that someone doesn't really want or having to be aggressive about it. It's also those relationship skills that really matter.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, there is relationship selling and there's transactional selling. I mean, that's what
Mm-hmm.
people distinguish. What did you do next? Did it go up or did it go down?
I would say it made a hard right in my career. This is where I decided to make another pivot. So I actually Monster was going through a lot of change, being acquired, and there was a lot of downsizing happening. So I had been there about 8 years and I actually ended up getting laid off. So I was ready for a change though. I felt like I had mastered it. Once I master something, sometimes I'll start to get bored. And I think that's the sense that I was getting. So I was already looking for a new role at the time when I got laid off. So it was a really good timing when that happened. And through my network, I found a role working at a startup company, a SaaS startup. I wanted the experience of working in a smaller organization because I'd always worked in large enterprise global organizations where you have a lot of resources. You're very siloed in the kind of work that you do. I also wanted to fully own the customer relationship. Before I'd been more of a partner to sales, but I wanted to own the customer relationship. So I went into, it was again still in the recruiting industry, but it was software that recruiters use to do their jobs every day. Got to go into an organization that had about 100 employees. It was super exciting, really exciting, because I worked in the same office as the CEO, the head of marketing, the head of engineering. The job I went into was customer success. I was in the first, at the time, it was called account manager, but it's a customer success role where you essentially own the customer relationship. It was thrilling, really thrilling, because I was doing everything. I was filing software bugs. I was doing tech support. I was doing the quarterly reviews with customers, doing training on the software, being in a support role, helping people, building relationships, doing the things that I loved. And I also love technology, right? I can geek out on technology too. So it was really checking a lot of boxes for me.
You basically hit on everything. I mean, most people move away from something they hate, whereas you move towards something you like. The one thing that I really love about what you said is that after 8 years, you mastered the job at Monster and got bored, and you thought it was time to move. That's quite commendable. I mean, most people would love to coast comfortably, right, as opposed to go into a new challenge. So quite amazing. And then you got into this, got really busy, had to learn. I mean, had to learn new things, and then
Oh, yeah.
loving it.
I had to get up to speed very quickly. And so it's interesting. You talked about sometimes we move away from something or we move towards something new. And actually, this was the first job where eventually started to go through burnout. So working at this startup, because it was a more of a small, under-resourced company, I started working 12-hour days and I wasn't taking care of my body. I was very much into yoga and health. I had a long commute to work. I started to experience what it was like to not have a lot of resources like a larger organization and to work such long hours. So that began a 3-year burnout cycle for me. But I look back, it was one of the best things that could have ever happened to me.
How come a burnout is a good thing to happen?
Well, one, I got to learn that I could indeed be a workaholic. I didn't know that about myself. So that was interesting. I think what I learned with that, I can work really hard and be really focused and dedicated. But now I've learned balance around that. So that was a great experience to learn that about how much I could do at once, right? How much I could accomplish. And I learned a lot about what I don't want to do. And I learned that working with the software at the time wasn't as stable. It had a lot of bugs. So I was dealing with a lot of upset customers. And that was really, really stressful for me because it felt like I had problems I couldn't solve on a daily basis. And that became very unfulfilling for me. I did a bit of a frying pan to the fire move because I was just eager to move on. Went into a role where I went back to what I had been doing before. This job was, again, even though it was a large global organization, have been around for many, many years. And I thought it would be easier. I'm doing air quotes. I thought it'd be easier. And it wasn't. I was still working just as hard. My commute was even longer. I was still working hard, and I was getting 300 emails a day. I just felt completely buried. That was the end of my burnout cycle, and actually what got me to start my own business. Because sometimes we learn through discomfort, right? Sometimes we're motivated to make change through discomfort. And that was that big pivotal moment in my career where I was so uncomfortable and so stressed out and burnt out. I mean, I had injured my shoulder from working so intensely on the train, on my laptop, and working 12-hour days. It was a wake-up call. It was a big wake-up call. And that's what got me to start pursuing something that was more of a passion of mine, which is coaching.
How did you discover coaching?
It was really interesting. I remember when I was working in downtown San Francisco and I was on the phone with one of my customers, just having a great conversation with her. And we were talking a little bit, she was sharing some of her personal life. And I just noticed in that moment how fulfilling that conversation was. Just showing up and being a support and being a mentor for my customer in that moment was completely lighting me up. And I remember thinking, I would love to get paid to do more of this, to have this be my job. And that was one of those moments of, aha, light bulb, right? This is one of the things that I love doing. This is fulfilling work for me. And it was kind of the opposite of what a lot of I was doing, in that job. The majority of my work was in that job, was very tactical. Shortly after that experience, a friend of mine encouraged me to attend a women's conference with her at the coast for the weekend. It's all women entrepreneurs. And she said, come on. And I said no to her like 2 or 3 times. She's like, come on, you can stay at my house in Monterey and we'll spend the weekend together and this will be fun. So I said yes, eventually. And I went, and that's where I met my who would become my mentor and help me build a business.
Coaching is one thing. Running a coaching business is yet another challenge, right? That whole dimension. So can you talk about that as well? Building and running a business.
That was also an exhilarating experience. I had never experienced that before. I decided to take a leap. I no longer had my job. I was just free, completely free, and gave myself the time and space to do that, to just focus on learning how to build a business. And I joined a year-long program to work alongside with other women that were also building businesses, very similar, like coaching type businesses, going on retreats and learning how to build this business. I had a lot of great success. I very quickly got my first client. I was out at a networking event. This was the sales piece, right, of building relationships. I was just talking about what I'm passionate about doing, what I love to do. And she's like, I'd love to work with you. And I wasn't even trying to sell her on anything. And I was like, oh, okay, this is really interesting. This is how it works. I started getting coaching clients from there. Living in Silicon Valley, I also realized my money was running out as I'm trying to build this business, that usually they recommend you hold on to your full-time gig while you build a business. And so I did this differently. I needed the break. Honestly, I needed that time. So I have no regrets about that. But it was the harder way to do it. So I started taking on contract work back with a former employer. That was working really well to help fill the gap. So I continued building my business. That was the model that I stuck with for a few years, where I was doing contract work. And what I loved about that is the freedom of the consultant lifestyle. So I was doing, it's like the best of both worlds. I still got to be in tech, and I was working with professional women, usually in technology, to help them figure out what fulfilling work looks like for them and to go after it.
I'm curious, actually. So you talk about your genius zone, and from what I've been hearing, it's just multiple genius zones, right?
Yeah, that's a really great
It's one
question.
genius zone after the other. Amazingly.
Right, and that's how humans are, right? It's not always just one thing that we're good at or is in our genius zone. I think it can be multiple things, and it's going to look different for everyone. So if we fast forward to today, to what I'm doing now, is I'm still taking private coaching clients, and I'm working at a consulting firm. It's a consulting firm that specializes in customer success. So it's the background that I've had, and I'm doing training, and I'm doing coaching. I'm doing leadership coaching. So I would say right now, this is hitting that sweet spot for me of 2 things I love doing is training and coaching. And training really essentially, there's a lot of coaching components to training. So I'm training these customer success teams how to have the resources and tools that they need to do their jobs well and to build more confidence, build more leadership, doing the leadership coaching with the teams and managers as well. And that's what my genius zone is right now, is inspiring, motivating, teaching, and my background in technology helps me because that's who I'm training are people that are managing, that are in SaaS, right? So they're managing these complex customers, often these large accounts.
Anything else in your journey? It just keep moving from good to better to better. Anything better than that?
That's to be seen, isn't it? So well, I'm very curious to see where this goes over the next few years. And even though it hasn't always been easy, and I've learned a lot of really tough lessons along the way, I've had also a lot of beautiful moments. And it's all part of what has got me to where I am today and made me the person that I am today. So, yeah, I'm always learning and growing. I'm someone who's always pushing myself or stretching my comfort zone in one way or another. So, yeah, it'll be really interesting to see where this goes. And I have very much have a passion for mindfulness in the workplace. And I'm really grateful to see that this is becoming a bigger topic, right? Especially with the current climate around the globe. There's a lot of talk around mental health and wellness in the corporate workplace. And I think it's amazing. I think we're heading in an exciting direction, even though globally we're in a very challenging time. I think it's waking us up to some things that weren't normally talked about in the work world. And I see myself being part of that shift as well.
What you just said resonated with me in the sense that they're not looking for comfort. They're not looking for easy, right? They're looking for something fulfilling, and fulfilling has growth in it, and growth has challenges, right? I think your courage to challenge yourself to find fulfillment in that growth, and you keep looking for that, which is an amazing journey of continued growth. What advice would you give someone yearning to find his or her genius? Is there a convenient advice you can offer them?
Yes, I would say yes to the things that scare you and
Mm,
stretch your comfort zone. Take risks and say yes to those
wow.
things that you think, like when I said yes to the sales job, I was terrified to do sales, but I said yes because there was something in me. You can feel it like a bubbling up of excitement. You can be afraid and do it anyway. So it's knowing that difference of this is exciting. It's a little scary, but it's also exciting. So being able to tap into that. What are those things that are kind of bubbling up? And it'll feel different for everybody, but there's a little bit of excitement or curiosity in that. So say yes to it, even if it scares you. And it could be a simple invitation to go to a networking event, to take on a part-time contract role, or whatever it is. Say yes to those things that stretch your comfort zone. And that's where you can learn a lot about what your genius zone is, things you may not have never known otherwise.
You just said say yes, and you added the element of curiosity. I read an article recently, and this person said, no wonder the workplace is not inspiring anybody because it's boring and stale. It needs to have more play and game in it, and play and game means the exercise of human curiosity. Does that make sense to you? Is that a big part of finding your genius zone?
Absolutely. I love that you shared that because I think what has been missing in many ways is bringing the full person to work. We get very compartmentalized and this is how you behave at work or this is what work is. And it's leaving out a lot of what our human nature is that's actually really fulfilling. So playfulness is part of it. It's one thing I love about the firm that I'm at now. There's a lot of joking around and a lot of lightness in our
Mm.
conversations. We get to business, but we'll also have a little bit of fun too, or even just sharing the things in our life that are playful or the personal things that make us who we are. Adding more play, imagination, and nurturing that innovation and imagination. When I'm doing coaching with teams, there's a really good book that I would recommend for anyone who is a leader in any form. It's called The Coaching Habit. It's about asking more questions. So talking less and asking more questions.
You had tremendous managers and friends who took you places and suggested to you to do things that you didn't know and you were scared of for you to say yes to. If somebody was not blessed with so many good friends and managers, how would they find things to say yes to?
Finding a mentor, right? So we've talked about that. This is how we're all coming together here tonight, is through mentoring. Finding a mentor that can support you and does have your back. You can do that through networking events or asking your friends, colleagues. So finding someone who will support you. There's a lot I could say about that, because sometimes we stay in a role, stay in a position or a job because we're not sure that we believe we're worthy of something better, right? So we might have a manager that makes us miserable, but we think, well, there's nothing better out there, right? So I think that's one thing that helped me, is to believe that there could be something better. So if it's hard for someone to find that within themselves, like the belief that it can be better, is to lean on other people maybe who have kind of figured that out, or who do have that belief system, and learn from them. Get support, get a coach, have a mentor if you can't afford a coach. There's a lot of ways to get great support, and a lot of people that really want to help.
If you were to write a book now about your journey so far, what would the title be?
I would say give yourself permission to take the risk, go after what you want, to actually love what you do work that lights you up.
Great. Thanks, Shannon. I hope everybody heard that and go out and do that, and we have a better world.
Thank you very much. If you would like to know more about us, please just send me a message, connect with me on LinkedIn. You can use the back channel here on Clubhouse, and I check my messages here as well. Thank you, everyone. And again, Shannon, thank you. Hong, thank you for being my partner for these sessions. I really, really appreciate the support. Enjoy the journey, everyone.